I was recently thinking about influencers and brands and some of the challenges that we've seen over the, semi-recent history in the marketing space. But then I also got to thinking about The Great Gatsby. Don't ask me why, I don't know how these things come into my brain, but I was thinking about the great American novel from the Jazz Age, written by F. Scott Fitzgerald almost 100 years ago this year, 95 to be specific. It got me to thinking that there are some parallels there between some of the personalities that we see and what brands and influencers look for out of each other. Let me explain that in this episode of The Full Monty.
Welcome to The Full Monty. With so much information constantly churning, it's easy to lose focus. This is the show that cuts through the clutter to provide you with insight and perspective on some of the most pressing issues of the day. And now, here's your host, Scott Monty.
So at its first blush, using The Great Gatsby as an example for marketing doesn't really seem to fit. But let me explain what it means. Now, if you're not familiar with The Great Gatsby, it's narrated by a guy named Nick Carraway who moves to New York for the summer, sets up a cottage, which just happens to be right next to the mansion of this guy named Jay Gatsby. Jay is known for throwing great parties, for his immense wealth, and it turns out that Jay is in love with Nick's cousin, Daisy Buchanan. Daisy's married to Tom, who comes from an ultra-rich family in Chicago. Now, Jay and Daisy are long-lost loves. He went off to the war, and while he was away, Daisy decided that Tom would be a better provider, and she married Tom. Long story short, there are all sorts of character flaws here. Tom is a brutish husband who's having an affair with a woman named Myrtle. Daisy just seems to like the good life. She must be pampered. She must be paid attention to. And Jay has finally invented himself into a man that he thinks can capture Daisy's attention and love. And really what's happening is Jay Gatsby is living in the past, while trying to recapture the past or recreate the past, when the past is past. We're never going to get back to it. But it serves as a lesson here, because as we look back to The Great Gatsby to think about how this might impact brands and influencers, it's important to take those lessons and learn from them. The reason I got thinking about this is because a couple of weeks ago, the Unilever CMO, Keith Weed, mentioned that Unilever was no longer going to work with influencers who were fraudulent, who bought followers, who weren't what they seemed. And I thought, well, good, finally. We need this kind of movement in the industry. We need somebody to stand up and stand up for what's right, and act in an honorable and ethical way. Because if the influencers aren't going to, then the brands should. It really becomes incumbent upon the brands. And the thing with brands and influencers is we see mostly relationships where brands are buying their way into influencers. Influencers put up a good show. They post their life on Instagram, for example, and it looks picture perfect. And we found in a number of cases that behind the scenes it actually isn't that perfect at all. And these folks are like a duck, very smooth on the surface, but really paddling, very rapidly beneath the surface, trying to make it appear that it's something that it's not. And that's exactly what Daisy was in The Great Gatsby. She loved the good life, the outward appearances. She was all goodness and light. But it turns out that she was just as corrupt and just as nefarious as Tom after she was responsible for a hit-and-run accident and then let Jay Gatsby take the blame, and then decided she wasn't going to leave her husband for Jay after all, that she liked the money and the comfort that came with being a Buchanan. And you could see how influencers love the life that they get from brands, love the attention that they get from their fans. They bask in the glory of attention just like Daisy did. And brands, on the other hand, are kind of like Tom, where they're just throwing money around. They think they can get away with a lot just because they're They're big. They have the budgets. They buy their way into relationships with influencers rather than actually having the relationship. A lot of brands actually outsource the relationship building to their agencies, and they let their agencies develop rapport with influencers. And this works well for agencies, too, because then agencies get to flaunt that relationship with various brands that they happen to be doing business with. So everybody benefits in some way, but does the consumer really see what's going on? Is it really right for the influencer to just be transactional in nature rather than truly developing a relationship, developing a mutual audience with the brand? So I think it's pretty clear that what we see in The Great Gatsby, it's an object lesson. Nick, the narrator of the novel, is from Minnesota, where life was simpler and seemingly more pure. And he ended the book by saying, "So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past." Now, I think we can look to the past to provide us with lessons of honorable behavior and how we might want to do things instead of getting, perhaps seduced by technology and doing the things that technology allows us to do rather than the things that we know we should do. The way we were raised, where a firm handshake and eye contact and a man's word is his bond, that kind of era. I know it sounds corny, but when you think about it, one of the things that's missing the most in relationships with consumers is trust. And if they can't trust brands to have a proper relationship with influencers, then all is lost. And when you look at what Unilever is doing, they've really got the right idea. Well, just a little bit of a mind dump here for you, how I brought the Great Gatsby into my thinking. Do you agree? Do you not? Do you think I'm full of crap? Let me know in a comment or shoot me an email. In the meantime, thanks for being with us. Thank you for joining me for a few minutes. If you like what you heard, please subscribe on the podcast player of your choice. And of course, check out the newsletter at philmontyshow.com. So long, and I'll see you on the internet.